Let's take a look at this really quick. Let's see. Experts explain why their crippling Japanese game development cannot keep up anymore. It can't keep up with China, man. Let's see. Let's take a look at it real quick. Let's see the reason. Let's see the reason why Japan cannot keep up. Leave the music was good. I know it was good. That's the whole point. It's for the BRB screen. Let's see what's going on here. Let's take a look at it. It's pretty obvious though.
Something has been quietly unsettling Japan's game developers, and it's not what you might expect. Games coming out of China and South Korea have been getting better and better lately.
Of course.
The quality is undeniably impressive. The presentation is good, the UI clean, the animation's fluid, the music sharp, and the storytelling cinematic. Whatever awkwardness or clumsiness there might have been is almost entirely gone, and they're releasing these games globally with precision on the markets that they're going after. But that's not actually what has Japan's developers losing sleep at night, because yeah, Japanese games are still phenomenal. Long-running series like Resident Evil...
Not in the gacha scene anymore, to be honest. In the gacha scene, they have been losing this battle or so against the Chinese and other specific regions when it comes to their gacha games.
Requiem and new IPs like Pragmata obviously prove that the craft is still there. So it's not the gap in quality, but something far more fundamental. It's the speed. Not just the speed of the finished product, the speed of everything. The speed of having something to show, the speed of testing it, the speed of identifying what's broken.
I bet you $10 they're using AI in their stuff. That's probably the reason why. They want live service because the MBA is teaching them on recurring revenue, like subscriptions has bigger value than better sales. But at the end of the day, they're using AI. I know for a fact they're using AI. They're not saying it or so, but they're definitely using AI to make these things so fucking fast. In order for you to be doing it this fast or so, you must be using some type of technology in order for it, you know?
And fixing it. The speed at which these other countries are churning out through ideas, iterating, reiterating, and evolving. They are building games at a completely different rate, which has left many Japanese developers feeling that they've somehow slipped into an entirely different dimension. And the final product itself isn't the most impressive thing about it, but the sheer volume of testing and experimentation that happens before anything ever even reaches the public. So in this video, I want to go through an article from a 26-year veteran in the Japanese gaming industry to see what he has to say on how Japan is being overtaken by foreign developers and what systems built into the Japanese industry are holding them back. With that being said, my name is Yuku Sensei, and this is how Japan is falling behind China in gaming development. Yasutaka Ikeda has spent 26 years in the Japanese gaming industry. Recently, he had a conversation with someone from a major Chinese publisher, and one thing left him completely speechless.
Of course.
The sheer speed at which they test prototypes. He was told that within 3 months at most, they build a fully playable prototype, test multiple concepts simultaneously, and ruthlessly cut anything that isn't working. And for the projects that show potential, they aim to give them concrete shape within a year. That is the pace that they are currently operating at. But it's not just about building fast and moving on, because while they're doing all of that, they're simultaneously tracking a whole web of other metrics, such as onboarding flow, retention rates, which gameplay loops to keep players hooked, ad performance, where users tend to drop off, and if anything doesn't hit their benchmarks, they go back and they redo it. The development and decision making are both moving at the same breakneck speed. Now, to be fair...
Well, if only the Western would actually learn something about that, to be honest. If only the Western side of video games would learn something, you know? Maybe they should take a note or something, you know? How to make actual good... But at the end of the day, you know, let's be honest here. China knows exactly what their player base wants, you know, compared to the other side of the continent.
Not every company operates like this. Yasutaka is clear that what he heard might not be the same for all companies, and that without massive capital and enormous development resources, this kind of pipeline isn't easy to replicate. But there was a second thing that he heard that made everything click into place. The reason modern Chinese games launch enormous global ad campaigns on day one, rolling out across PC, mobile, and console simultaneously, isn't because they have the money to burn. They pull that trigger because by the time that launch day arrives, they've already run exhaustive tests to a calculated path to victory. So by the time launch day arrives, it's a calculated certainty. not a gamble. And that stands in sharp contrast, if not the complete opposite to the typical Japanese approach. Japanese publishers tend to operate with the mindset of, we don't know if it'll work, so let's launch first and see how it goes. And if the reception is good,
They made RPG gotchas. I'm like, it works for that, you know?
then we'll run a few ads, which in today's landscape is a little naive. Think of it like two chefs running a kitchen. The Japanese chef is making each dish from start to finish with all the intricacies and little details just to find out that the customer doesn't like the pasta. The Chinese chef is first cooking up and throwing several different pastas at the wall, figuring out which ones actually stick. And
I feel like it's AI though. I feel like if they run multiple different prototypes, it has to be like some aspect of AI in the workflow itself, dude. There's no way it's not, you know?
only then committing to finishing the dish. Yasutaka doesn't say this as an outsider looking in. He says it because he's lived it. Reflecting on the projects he's been a part of, he admits that this is exactly how he's worked in the past. He and his team were always strapped for time, cutting things down to the wire, and even when they built in a buffer, development almost always fell behind. There was never enough time to meticulously polish those critical first hours of gameplay, the exact hours that determine whether someone sticks around or not. The onboarding, the level design, the all-important first impression.
No, he's explaining it how it is right now. Why gacha games are just more superior compared to Japanese games in general when it comes into the gacha market.
Always rushed every time right at the end. He says, looking back, it feels like a collection of development practices that desperately needs reflection. And that's why when trying to understand what makes these modern Chinese titles succeed, only looking at the finished game isn't enough. That surface level analysis misses the point entirely. You have to look at everything that led to that point. The number of iterations, the prototypes that got scrapped, and the tests that happened before a single player ever touched it. This lesson isn't limited to industry giants like Nintendo or Capcom or Bandai Namco. Yasutaka recognizes it scales all the way down to indie developers, bloggers, people posting on Twitter, and to basically anyone who creates anything. He says, it's the exact same for indie development, or even things like blogging, posting on X, planning, and everyday work. If you spend too much time overthinking, your idea will become obsolete before you even put it out there. The grand vision swells in your head while you paralyze yourself wondering, what if I fail? You try to polish it to perfection before launching, and you decide to gather just a little bit more data first. That's the trap. That's the endless internal deliberation. Getting inside your own head too much, and the paralysis that comes from trying to control.
Yeah, like fucking Tetsuya Nomura fucking taking forever to make fucking Kingdom Hearts and all other specific Final Fantasy games. Yeah, I've seen this before. He's not wrong here. I've seen it with the Square Enix projects that they do.
Every little thing before taking a single step. And this paralysis, Yasutaka argues, has gripped the Japanese gaming industry as a whole, because while they're thinking and honestly overthinking, someone else has already shipped their version. They've launched it, they've watched how people react, and they're already in the middle of fixing it. But, and this is important, he's not saying to just throw sloppy work out there and hope for the best. Shipping something unfinished and breaking the trust of your players is a serious mistake.
Yeah.
Low quality for the sake of speed is never the answer. Yasutaka says that the real lesson is this. The core problem isn't low quality itself, it's irresponsibility. And being responsible doesn't mean being slow. He says, take responsibility, but ship small. Take responsibility, but read the room. Take responsibility, but test and fix. This is what Japanese game developers need to understand. He points to ByteDance's TikTok shop as an illustration of...
Brother, remember how long it took us for us to get Final Fantasy, like, 15? How many games were there in between or so since Final Fantasy? Because it wasn't Final Fantasy 15 to begin with. And the amount of iterations that happened or so during that time or so, the guy... It has been proven multiple times that the guy is a bit of a perfectionist, okay? Like, he is a bit of a perfectionist. They've said it themselves. So he likes to take things like that far in detail when it comes to like his games in general, which I get it. I understand they're your babies and everything like that, but holy shit though. Sometimes, you know, I wish Bethesda would take notes. You're asking too much from Western devs. Like legit.
what this looks like in practice. At ByteDance, the cycle of testing, adjusting, and releasing moves at a ferocious pace. And on top of that, they've built systems to share weekly trend reports openly through online webinars with anyone who wants access. It's a completely different field from gaming, but you can see the underlying difference in mentality and all-in commitment at every level to doing whatever it takes to make the final product succeed. Which brings us to NTE. Now, stay with me here because it's going to make sense. NTE is a perfect example of what we've just been talking about. NTE, or Neverness to Everness, is an open-world RPG developed by Hotta Studio built on Unreal Engine 5.
Your mom's a perfectionist.
It launched globally on April 29th, 2026. Urban open world, anime-inspired visuals.
No. The original concept of Final Fantasy 15 was the one from what was the original name? Was it like Versus or something like that? I forgot the original name specifically. Remember, this was back in like, what was it? 2013, 2012 or something like that. I don't know how old we're talking about or so, but that was the original vision of Final Fantasy 15. But then the amount of like iterations of Final Fantasy that came out afterwards, we thought the game was fucking dead, you know, because we thought it was dead in the fucking water. And then Final Fantasy 15 came out, and that's what it became to be. Not even nowhere, like the character is still the same, right? The actual main protagonist. But the vision itself of what it was originally supposed to be has been long gone, you know.
Cross-platform on day one across PC, mobile, and console. But what matters most in the context of this conversation isn't the art style or the gameplay. It's how it was built for a global audience from day one. It released teasers, trailers, and other gameplay footage well ahead of launch. Millions of players signed up for pre-registrations, and they built genuine social media momentum. Then they had a first round of beta tests, then a second round, and a third, to the point where people were wondering if this game was ever going to come out. But when it eventually did, they kept that momentum alive with events and generous rewards. The 1.2 livestream recently dropped, and my Twitter feed was flooded with players excited.
Yes, dude, my entire feed is also filled with like NTE stuff too as well.
The upcoming update, myself included. On launch day alone, NTE generated 100 million Chinese yuan in revenue globally.
Jesus.
That's not luck. That's years of testing finally paying off. At the time, Japanese developers were among the loudest voices saying that this game shouldn't have even been possible. Masahiko Nakamura,
Really?
the representative of Japanese indie developer Indie Us Games, posted publicly that the technical polish of NTE was, in his words, extraordinary. He specifically noted that climbing to the highest point in the game's city and comparing the PC and iOS versions showed barely any difference in visual quality, and he said he kept asking himself, why can't Japan make something like this? I actually have a video going more into that here.
It has to be with some form of tech or so, with AI in general, you know. It has to be, because we did find out that, you know, yes, they do use AI or so, but like even then, it's been in the video game industry for quite some time anyways. But my question is, like, it has to be a secret, like it has to be a special secret tech or so that they're using. It has to be something, unless there's some genius wizard Jesus or so at their game studio that they don't want to unveil who it is or so, that they're the ones who made this specific game the way how it is on mobile and PC.
So be sure to check that out after you've finished watching this one, if you're interested. In a nutshell though, the answer that keeps coming up from Japanese developers themselves is budget and scale. Masahiko noted that for a single title, over 200 people were constantly working on characters alone. Not the whole game. 200 people just for the characters. Meanwhile, Japanese companies are hesitant to commit those kinds of resources to a single high-risk project because Japanese companies prioritize stability over risk. And that, to me, is the real thing that Yasutaka's article is pointing at, even if he doesn't say it quite this directly.
But gambling is always a thing,
isn't the talent. It isn't the creativity. It isn't even the desire to make something great. The problem is structural, and that matters because structural problems don't get fixed purely by motivation. On its own, NTE's strategy isn't rare. Major titles do this. What's different now is that this approach isn't the exception anymore. It's the norm. It's the baseline expectation. And Yasutaka believes that titles like NTE have earned something beyond their release. He feels that people can no longer just lazily categorize these games as just a mobile game or just free play or just a Chinese game.
Yep.
They've transcended those labels entirely, whether the industry and the gaming playbase wants to acknowledge it or not. Now let's just
I've said this before, so like when Genshin Impact came out or so, I literally said this to like a lot of my friends or so. It feels like we're gonna go into the golden era or the gold rush or so of like gacha games becoming like AAA status, basically, you know, as in like in its realm or so in the gacha like mobile game sphere, right? Like the whole like when Genshin Impact came out or so, to feel like this is the start of something bigger that is going to happen, you know? This is going to be something where like a lot of certain companies are going to be chasing this specific type of trend to become the next big thing, you know? It will become oversaturated though, which is going to be a very much a big problem, you know? They also said how Wuwa make use of the UE4 is perverse.
zoom out to the market level for a moment. According to Sensor Tower's 2025 Japan Gaming Market Report, Japan still maintained a massive $11 billion market in mobile in-app purchases in 2025, second only to the Chinese iOS market across all of Asia. People are still playing. The downloads are there. We can see them. But monetization is no longer as effortless as it used to be. The same report notes that while domestic Japanese publishers remain relatively strong, there's been a huge surge of overseas competition. Games like Last War Survival and Whiteout Survival and RPGs like Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact are consistently cited as examples of foreign publishers successfully capturing Japan's high-spending user base. To be clear, Japan's market is still powerful, but it is no longer an exclusive playground for Japanese companies like before. Japanese publishers relying solely on domestic audiences and single-platform gacha business models are going to see their revenues stall. That math is unavoidable, but the deeper problem is that Japanese developers have historically turned their instincts for their domestic players first and foremost, and that might not be good enough in the current market. Overseas publishers, particularly those in China, are now meticulously testing artwork, pacing, UI, gacha mechanics, event management, and social media marketing calibrated not only for their own domestic audiences, but for the Japanese users specifically. And there's one more thing that makes this especially unsettling for Japanese publishers who tend to make most of their money in the first few months after launch. Some of these foreign live service games don't peak at launch. Their numbers actually grow over time as they keep operating. That signals a genuine long-term commitment, a belief that if given enough runway, these games will take off. This article was originally written as a retrospective on the Japanese market in 2025, but the momentum has only continued. Looking at Sensor Tower's report for the second half of 2025, Last War Survival was the top earning mobile game in Japan for that period. And in terms of downloads, Block Blast led with a monthly average exceeding 800,000. What this tells us is that the Japanese market isn't weakening. Domestic IP and domestic publishers are still holding their ground. The shift is in the competitive landscape itself. Before, it was a clear, open field with enough room for everyone to breathe, but now it's a crowded arena with everyone fighting for their own place. Domestic IPs, foreign publishers, Forex strategy games, casual games, anime RPGs, rhythm games, dating simulators, all of them are fighting for the limited free time of Japanese players, and there are more and more of them every single day. The modern playbook looks something like this. Build a game, release it, show it to multiple markets, do a huge ad campaign, drive engagement with events, bring players back with updates and rewards, and put more resources into whatever users are responding to. That's expected now, but the speed at which that entire pipeline moves has become absolutely critical, and it's only accelerating. Historically, Japanese game companies competed on the sheer quality and polish of the final product, and they still do, but the competition has evolved. It's no longer just a battle of who can make the most polished game. It's a battle
Hold on. What he said,
of who can
when he
showcase
said quality in general, I just look at like I know it's not a gacha game or anything like that, but I look at the Sword Art Online game that's basically either it's already has been released when I published this video, but I'm just kind of looking at it. I'm like polish. That's all I gotta say.
Test fastest, and fix
Polish,
fastest.
alright.
Fall behind on that, and even a beautifully crafted game risks being buried before anyone even discovers it. And this isn't uniquely a Japanese or Chinese game story either. The entire market has shifted. On Steam, over 19,000 new games were released in 2025 alone, another all-time high, more than any previous year. And yet, despite that, an overwhelming number of those new titles got less than 10 reviews, meaning that the vast majority of games launched but then vanished completely invisible to the market. Yeah, that includes a massive number of small-scale projects, like they can't all be major commercial releases, but from the consumer's perspective, there's a staggering number of choices that multiplies every single day. We are no longer living in an era where build something good and players will eventually find it is true. Making something great is just the baseline, and for better or worse, it's no longer enough. The ability to run microtests repeatedly has become absolutely critical in modern game development. Show it, test it, see the reaction, fix it, show it again, tweak the onboarding, analyze what failed to connect during the initial launch, repeat. And this is precisely where Japanese development pipelines tend to get bogged down. But the thing is, though, that this slowness isn't by accident, and it's not even a bad habit, really. It's the logical output of a system that was designed to never publicly fail. Japanese corporate decision-making runs on what's called the ringi system. The way this system works is someone at or near the bottom writes up a proposal. It circulates from person to person up through immediate supervisors, department heads, and eventually to senior leadership. Every layer of this needs seals of approval with their personal hanko seal. But before that formal process even begins, there's another Japanese thing that has to be performed called nemawashi. Nemawashi is an informal round of one-on-one conversations with every key stakeholder to quietly build consensus.
What?
This is done so nobody is surprised in the meeting and nobody loses face. The result of all of this, though, is that decisions can take weeks or months to even reach the table. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that the actual approval meeting is often the very last step, because by then everything has already been decided through quiet hallway conversations. In a world where speed doesn't matter, this system works beautifully. Everyone has ownership, nobody's blindsided, implementation is smooth because everyone is on board and understands what's going on before the paper was even signed. But in a world where your competitors are shipping new prototypes every 3 months, these outdated processes become a structural anchor, only slowing you down. And this is the part that should genuinely worry people, because you cannot fix it by just telling people to move faster. There's no power of friendship that would work for this. That's not how structural systems work. It's like telling a cargo ship to turn a corner like a sports car. The problem isn't the crew's attitude, it's the size of the ship itself. And on top of everything already mentioned, Japanese developers have to first greenlight the pitch, then secure the budget, align internal stakeholders, confirm with IP holders, get legal approval, coordinate with marketing, double check to ensure nothing fails, triple check to prevent social media backlash, and then verify every decision along the way so that no one internally feels anxious about it. There's a joke over here in Japan about the sheer number of confirmations and meetings at companies. Once, and this is 100% true, I had to send out several emails to confirm when to have a meeting about when we were going to have a meeting. The bureaucracy over here is absolutely unbelievable. But in saying that, there's also an argument to be made that all of this matters. The larger the corporation, the less room there is to throw things at the wall randomly. More stakeholders means more boxes to check, and slacking on that creates disasters. But while they're busy checking boxes, the market keeps moving. Player interest keeps shifting, competitors keep shipping, and that tension is exhausting. Japanese game development genuinely has unique strengths such as the near-obsessive attention to detail, the tactile feel of controls, atmosphere, nuanced UI designs, and deep emotional investment in characters. These are qualities that rarely emerge from anywhere outside the Japanese studio. But that very strength can become a trap. It creates an expectation of perfection right out of the gate. Structures get built too safely to guarantee.
Best example is because of Kingdom Hearts. That's the reason why. That is the best example because of Tetsuya Nomura.
Guarantee zero failure. Ideas get filtered through what can be easily justified internally, and new game pitches end up drifting toward whatever won't upset anyone. Then, by the time everything is approved and ready, launching takes forever. And when launching takes forever, your number of tests drops. Imagine a baseball player stepping up to the plate who's so focused on calculating the pitch speed, the wind direction, the ball spin, and the launch angle, but by the time that they've worked everything out, the ball has already flown right past them. And when you're not actually swinging, your probability of hitting a home run drops to 0. That is the current state of game development in Japan. Another layer to this that's just as important as time: the money. When you compare what game developers in Japan earn versus what they earn in China, Japan actually looks kind of competitive on paper. Open Money, a service that provides information on working conditions in Japanese companies based on user data, recently published some statistics related to major Japanese game companies like Capcom and Nintendo. On average, the yearly income was anywhere between $43,000 and $63,000 annually. China, on the other hand, comes in a little lower. According to Glassdoor, the yearly income for a Chinese game developer could be anywhere between $33,000 and $58,000. So Japan pays more, right? End of story. Not quite. Because the question isn't just how much you're paying people, it's also what you're getting from those people in exchange. And that's where it gets a bit uncomfortable. China's tech industry became notorious for what's known as the 996, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. That's 72 hours a week total. It was widespread across major studios. Alibaba founder Jack Ma famously called it a blessing for young workers in 2019. And while it was always technically illegal under Chinese labor law, enforcement was essentially non-existent for years. That has been changing. The Chinese government has officially ruled 996 illegal and major companies have started enforcing earlier end times. But the cultural hangover is still real and many studios, particularly in games, still operate in that grey zone of informal overtime pressure, even if they're not putting it in writing. Japan has its own version of this problem. It has a word for it, in fact. Karoshi. Death from overwork. The Japanese government enacted a work-style reform bill in 2019 that for the first time set a legal ceiling on overtime. Under the current framework, the standard limit is 45 hours of overtime per month and 360 hours per year, with a hard ceiling of 100 hours per month in special circumstances. But the thing is that in practice, many Japanese game studios have what's called predetermined overtime built directly into the contracts. Predetermined overtime means that there's a certain number of extra hours already factored into the base salary. This creates an implicit expectation that you need to work overtime regardless of whether a crunch period is officially called or not. Otherwise, you're seen as effectively stealing from the company because those hours have already been paid for. One developer with experience at a major Japanese publisher said that a colleague of theirs had to miss an important social event because they were crunching on a project that hadn't even been announced yet. This was crunch baked into the normal development cycle, months or years before launch. So here's what the actual comparison looks like. Japan pays its developers more per year on paper, but constrains their output through structural slowness, approval chains, consensus building, risk aversion, all the stuff that we just talked about. China historically paid less, but extracted far more hours and moved at a fundamentally different, faster pace. And China's studios have used that velocity to build bigger teams and run more tests and get more iterations out of the door. The uncomfortable conclusion is this. Japan isn't just losing on speed, but it's also losing out on output per person. Not because Japanese developers are less talented.
I heard you can become balder even faster if you work in the Asia territory as a video game developer. But that's just a rumor, though. I can't confirm that or deny that.
They're clearly not. But because the system that they work inside is optimized for the wrong thing. It's optimized to avoid failure, not to accumulate wins, and you can't buy your way out of that with a higher salary. And to be completely clear, and in saying all of this, I am not advocating for anyone to be worked to the bone. At its core, game development is a war against uncertainty. You can never know with absolute certainty that a game will sell before it's built. You might create something that you generally find fun, but it completely misses its audience. On the other hand, a tiny feature that felt completely insignificant internally might resonate enormously with the players. That fundamental unpredictability never goes away, which is exactly why you need to get tests out of the door, as many as possible and as quickly as possible. Take as many swings of the bat as you can, but the larger the company, the heavier that bat becomes and the heavier the burden of justifying a test before it even starts. The accountability for failure grows and the weight of past success stories becomes an anchor. And so instead of bold experimentation, pitches designed merely to avoid losing points are the ones that get greenlit. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, others are testing, fixing, and shipping again, and the velocity gap keeps widening.
I like
Through reading this
the
article, it seems
producer
Yasutaka
so
has arrived at a
partying.
firm conclusion about where the industry is heading. The future of gaming doesn't belong to whoever can drop a flawless, perfectly polished product on the very first attempt. Instead, value will shift to those who can fix things after they've shipped. Those who can look at the data, read the audience reaction, and understand exactly what failed to land. Those who don't take user feedback entirely at face value, but can read between the lines to uncover the underlying frustrations and unspoken expectations buried inside the criticism. Those that can translate that understanding into a fresh angle, a better iteration, and a stronger version of what they had before. Ultimately, the only track to guaranteed success is devs listen. It's not just production speed that matters now, it's the speed of observation.
Imagine having developers actually listening, though. Shocking, right? Kind of crazy, huh? You know, only if only the Western audiences, you know, for the developers can actually do something. You know, I'm just saying. Like I said, they could take a couple notes or so from fucking China, but they don't want to do that, to be honest. So
The speed of fixing, the speed of pivoting your messaging, the speed of forming and testing the next theory. These are the qualities that will define who wins and
or
who
you
doesn't.
can be like
What the
Fate
Japanese gaming
Trigger.
industry needs to
I don't
fear
even know where
isn't just
Fate
the
Trigger
sheer
disappeared
quality
off
of
to.
Chinese games.
I think
The
they
real
pulled their own trigger on their own fate.
threat is losing the test count battle, basically not making enough swings at the plate in the first place. While Japan focuses on building in a way that ensures zero failure, their competitors are failing repeatedly, but also fixing
That's a
repeatedly
pretty
and
cool
putting things
setup
in
or
front
so
of
for
real
like
players
for the
repeatedly.
tablet and
And by the
everything.
time the gap becomes
I would totally do that,
undeniable, it
actually.
won't be a gap in polish. It will be a gap purely in speed. While I was reading this, I was reminded of the parable of the pottery class. For those that haven't heard it, it goes something like this. There was once a pottery teacher with his own class of students. One month, he decided to split his class into two groups. Group A had to make a pot every day for 30 days, so 30 pots in total, whereas Group B had to work on a single pot for the whole 30 days, and at the end of the month, he judged the quality. Every one of the top 10 pots came from Group A, the group that made
course.
one pot per day.
Yeah.
None came from Group B that focused on perfecting their single pot.
course.
Japan is working like they're in Group B, making that perfect pot, whereas
Yep.
China and South Korea are in Group A, making pot after pot, getting better and better each time. The Japanese gaming industry still holds massive advantages. The ability to fine-tune every detail, the profound love for characters and world building, the capacity to craft timeless experience that sticks with people for years. These are not qualities that disappear easily. But the era where those qualities alone were enough to win, that era is over. The market is fast and output is exploding. Player attention spans are shortening and overseas competitors are studying the Japanese market with
Yeah, and I blame TikTok for the fucking shortening time attention span, to be frankly honest. Also those parents are so putting their kids on iPads basically. So I also blame them too.
extraordinary care. And here's where I want to add my own personal thoughts before I close. Yasutaka ends on an optimistic note, a call to reevaluate velocity, to launch smaller and to observe and adapt more. And I agree with him, but I think there's something that he leaves implicit that needs to be said out loud. Wow, you can hear my voice going in this. Moving faster isn't a cultural problem for Japan. It's a structural one. And structural problems don't get fixed by inspiration alone. You can show a Japanese developer every Chinese prototype pipeline in the world, and if the Ringi process still requires 6 stakeholders to stamp a document before a single beta goes live, the speed of iteration doesn't change. The system produces what the system is designed to produce. And right now, the system is designed to produce certainty, not speed. And in a market that rewards speed, that's a real problem. What would actually have to change is how authority...
That's so weird because how I was trained or so, well, in any of the workplaces that I did or so was always trained about speed in general. When it came to when it came to certain things, especially working at a restaurant or so, speed is always everything, you know. You always perfect it after, you know, after many tries.
flows, like who gets to make the decisions and how much failure is acceptable at which stages. That is not a conversation that most large Japanese corporations are ready to have, because the entire structure of seniority, consensus, and collective responsibility runs the opposite way. That doesn't mean that Japanese game development is doomed, like far from it. The indie scene in Japan is genuinely vibrant, and smaller studios without the weight of a corporate ladder can move more like their Chinese counterparts. And there are, of course, outliers like developers inside larger organizations who have found ways to carve out faster moving pockets, but for the industry as a whole, the change that's needed right now isn't a mindset shift. It's a structural one, and those are slow.
You've never had articles or so where kids cannot walk or kids can't read at a certain age. You never had articles like that go that massive or so at this point, saying that a certain percentage of kids or so cannot learn how to read anymore, or can have a long attention span.
That isn't lost on anyone. What Japanese developers need going forward isn't just to build bigger. They need to show their work faster, test on a smaller scale, fix things more quickly, and above all, learn and adapt things after the game is already in players' hands. I'll leave the last word to Yasutaka. When you realize that neighboring countries are building games at an entirely different velocity, you don't need to match their pace by building massive things at the same speed. But you do need to reevaluate your own velocity. In an era where more and more ideas grow obsolete while you overthink them, the winners will be those who can launch, observe, and adapt. Looking at the current state of the industry, I feel this deeply. I'll leave a link to the original article
I
down below,
see.
and drop a comment and let me know what you think. I'm especially curious if anyone working in the Japanese industry has a different perspective on this, because I'd love.
That's a very interesting, to be honest. Experts explains why Japan's gacha is losing to China. That's also another video too as well. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at also, because like at the end of the day, right? They did say that like AI was discovered or so in NTE. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same thing with the other gacha games in general, especially coming from China. Like they're using that specific technology, right? For them to like, be able to like, because they did say, right, they want to minimalize certain aspects of the workflow but maximize in other aspects of the workflow. That's the only reason why. So, but yeah, it is very interesting to be seeing something like this. What an interesting conversation overall. So like I said, one of my, at least I like this specific thing or so when it comes to like some of the gacha games in general, like the inside behind the scenes and everything in the Japanese marketplace. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion, though. I think it's definitely the help of the AI to cut certain like minute things that you don't really need to focus on quite a bit, and they can maximize more on other aspects of their specific workflow. Because I bet you those 200 specific developers or so that are working on the characters in general in like in the art department, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they're each one of them, or specifically some of them or so, are using the AI to help the actual artist to minimalize and be like, hey, we need this, this, and this, and this. So yeah, I don't know, man. I'm kind of a little bit saddening or so that he didn't talk about it or so, because like it would have been nice to be like, okay, this is like my personal theory or so in this conversation. Because come on, man, let's be honest here. The AI conversation is pretty massive. Okay, all right. And that's just me, anyways, though. Anyways, that's the end of the video. And honestly, like I said, there is a video. There is literally a video on YouTube that you can search up yourself of like, of basically like China is making a one-to-one copy or so of the Western developers, like just video games in general, but make it better though. And it is being proven every single day, every single month, and every single year that their shit themselves are going to be the newer and better version of the video game industry. And it has been proven a bit multiple times. The Black Myth Wukong game was the floodgate that opened everything for everyone else. So, but we'll see what happens in the future, though. There's still many more games coming out from China, though. So we'll see. Anyways, that's the end of the video, and peace.